Hello, folks. Welcome back. This is Chris in Central Pennsylvania. The New York Times broke a huge story on Sunday, March 30th, 2025, with details which they obtained from a leaky State Department regarding the refugee resettlement offer for Afrikaners from South Africa. In something titled Mission South Africa, How Trump is Offering White Afrikaners Refugee Status. Well, folks, first off, they have no evidence that it's just white South Africans. That's their assumption. It's not an illegitimate assumption, but it's an assumption yet again. The New York Times is saying white, not the administration. It could include others who consider themselves Afrikaners. We're yet to hear what that story is. The United States has banned most refugees, including 20,000 people who were already prepared to travel to the United States before Trump took office. But Trump is making one exception. Now, Trump's 20th January executive order froze the program globally owing to widespread Biden regime fraud in the refugee resettlement program. Now, what the New York Times doesn't tell you is that the program was suspended for 90 days. Funny how the New York Times reporters did not mention that in their effort to play the race card in this story. Now, the State Department is rapidly establishing a program called Mission South Africa to help Afrikaners come to the United States as refugees, according to documents obtained by the New York Times. So for the South Africans who are coming into my chat 40 days after this executive order is announced, oh, it's taking so long, it's taking so long, it's taking so long. It's not taking so long. The State Department has established a program called Mission South Africa, and it's in the works, as I've been saying for some time. Now, my question is documents obtained by the New York Times. So is this more illicit disclosure of government information? Yet again, a leaky government that can't keep secrets. Now, under phase one of the program, the United States has already deployed multiple teams to convert commercial office space in Pretoria into ad hoc refugee centers, according to the documents. Now, folks, this tracks exactly with what I've been telling you, that it's likely that this won't be done at the embassy. There's no place to do it there. They'll hire buildings and bring people in to do it. Now, they've already looked at Pretoria, according to documents that the New York Times has obtained from somebody who's leaking. Now, the teams are studying more than 8,200 requests expressing interest in resettling in the United States, and have already identified 100 Afrikaners who could be approved for refugee status. Now, that, I suspect, are the people they've called in for interviews, a few of whom have provided their details to me, and I've related their experience. Now, according to the New York Times, government officials have been directed to focus particularly on screening white Afrikaner farmers. Now, folks, before you panic, because a lot of South Africans will do that, I wouldn't put too much stock in that statement from the New York Times, as their article is far from balanced or objective. Number one, they're making an assumption about race. There's no evidence that it's just going to be white South Africans. It's very likely it could be the case, but they have no evidence of it, and they should put disclaimers in there to say that they don't have that evidence. Number two, they neglect to mention the 90-day pause so as to imply that the Trump administration is intentionally denying people of color in favor of whites coming from South Africa. That's simply dishonest and disingenuous. They say that the program was suspended, but they don't say it's a 90-day pause to reevaluate the program. So that's simply dishonest. So that's two reasons not to take what they say seriously. Number three, they're eliciting comments from polarizing public figures like Ernst Rutz in the story to downplay Afrikaner interest in the program. In it, they quote Ernst Rutz saying he doesn't know any Afrikaners that want to come to America. Well, Ernst, you may not know any Afrikaners, but I know thousands of them. So I'm not sure who you're talking to, Ernst. Yeah, I know you talk to me, but I talk to thousands of Afrikaners who have interest in the program. So putting one side of the story in there and intentionally commenting on Ernst Rutz, who has nothing to do with this program whatsoever, rubbishing the fact that people might want to come here, well, that's dishonest. That's a third reason not to trust what they're saying in this article. And a fourth reason, they seek a quote from a pro-refugee activist, yet no one on the opposite side of that refugee conversation is even included in the story. And the fifth reason it's difficult to take them seriously in this article is they pull at your heartstrings with the sob story of a Congolese refugee already safe in America while playing the race card. Now, here's some news that should be interesting to South Africans. According to the New York Times, by mid-April, U.S. officials on the ground in South Africa will propose long-term solutions to ensure the successful implementation of the president's vision for a dignified resettlement of eligible Afrikaner applicants. Now, this is according to a memorandum sent from the embassy in Pretoria to the State Department in Washington this month. Now, since the story was written by journalists in New York, it indicates to me that the leaks are coming out of Washington, not out of Pretoria. So people are at the embassy or in the State Department, more likely, are leaking classified or protected information. This is information that should not be available to the public right now for many reasons. Since New York Times reported on it, I'm analyzing what they said and sharing it with you. Now, this is where they comment with pro-refugee crowd. There's no subtext and nothing subtle about the way this administration's immigration refugee policy has obvious racial and racist overtones. While they seek to single out Afrikaners for special treatment, they simultaneously want us to think mostly black and brown vetted newcomers are dangerous despite their background checks and all evidence to the contrary. This from Vanessa Cardenas, the executive director of America's Voice. Well, she doesn't speak for me, and I'm an American. I don't know who Vanessa Cardenas is, but this is clear race hustling. You know, it's odd I don't recall her advocating for white South Africans when virtually no whites were admitted as refugees. And almost all of the 3.1 million people resettled in America since 1980 under the Refugee Resettlement Program have been people of color. So letting in a handful of white folks has racist overtones? Nah. It's more like her whining has racist overtones. Now, the State Department confirmed that it had begun interviewing applicants and said that they would need to pass stringent background and security checks. Once again, this tracks with what I told you ever since February 7th. And it also is in line with the 2 videos I've done on the results of refugee interviews, preliminary ones. An appeals court ruled last week that the administration must admit those thousands of people who were granted refugee status before Trump entered office, but also declined to stop him from halting the admission of new refugees. Well, I've also reported on that. People freaked out when they heard this was going on. Well, there were people who had already been approved to come here, and in good faith, we should have allowed them to come here. I think it was not fair of the Trump administration to stop them from coming. But they claimed there was fraud, and that's why they did it. So I haven't seen the cases, so I can't speak to it. Now, here's where the New York Times once again spreads propaganda that's easily refutable. The New York Times falsely claims that white people own half of South Africa's land while making up just 7% of the country's population. Yeah, and they say that police statistics do not show that they are any more vulnerable to violent crime than any other people in the nation. That's simply not true when it comes to farm murders. They clearly are. The problem is that they're using fake data from the police who are lying about the number of farm murders. Now, this is yet another New York Times lie. The only valid data regarding land possession is the 2017 land audit, in which whites, identified by surnames, not by skin color, which includes many colors, owned 29% of privately held land in South Africa, not 50%. But that's just 23% of the surface area of the country. And this is a stark contrast to the lie told by Ronnie Lamola, who claims that whites own 80% of the land. And those who repeat the lie that whites own 72% of the land because they're lazy or dishonest, because whites own 72% of the 36 million hectares defined as agricultural. So the bottom line here is white South Africans 2017, by the loose definition given by the government, controlled just 29% of privately held land and 23% of the total land area, not 80%, or as New York Times lies, 50%. Zumba Baruti, a Congolese refugee living in South Carolina, I've noticed he's living in South Carolina, spent decades in a refugee camp in Africa waiting for his turn to be accepted. This is also in line with what I've told you. 7.6 million Africans are waiting in camps, sometimes for years and years and years, decades, to come to the U.S. or Denmark or Australia. He says those whites are allowed to enter the United States, but black Africans are denied entry to the United States in Swahili. So my question is, Mr. Baruti, why aren't you speaking English? You can't learn English? We let you in the country and you can't speak English? Seriously? He said the pivot away from refugees who have waited in camps for years to Afrikaners was a form of discrimination. Is it unfair? Yes. But is it discrimination? No. You were allowed in. Whites have long been denied entry to the United States as refugees from Africa. That was discrimination. We didn't let whites come here from Belgian Congo where they're being slaughtered, raped, and chopped into pieces. No, or Mozambique, or Rhodesia, or Angola. No. When Mr. Baruti entered, he said he was told by advisors helping him with his application that his family would most likely join him in 2 years. Well, that's what I've also told you. You have 2 years after you arrive, you can apply to get family members to come here if they weren't on your application or didn't come with you. This tracks exactly with what I previously indicated is possible under the refugee program. So that's in some ways big news. Someone with a big mouth is disclosing government information which the public should know. But since it's out there in the public, it's necessary for an objective observer like myself to analyze the data and tell you what's going on here. And again, the New York Times says they are prioritizing white farmers. Well, I wouldn't put too much stock in that. That may very well be the case. But the New York Times article is dishonest about the pause in the refugee program, not telling you that it's simply a pause and that it would be reinstated or reevaluated for 90 days. And also their efforts to pull at the heartstrings, and also to quote Ernst Rhodes when he says, I don't know any Afrikaners that want to come to the United States. I'm sorry, Ernst, but I find that implausible. I'm not even in South Africa. I know thousands of Afrikaners are interested. Again, I'm not encouraging anyone to come here or discouraging you, simply reporting objectively about what's going on and analyzing what's out there. So This video will get some people spazzing out because that's the nature of some people in South Africa. Others will be nonplussed by it, and some will actually listen to what I said and evaluate for themselves. The New York Times article is not objective. It's biased and heavily slanted against the Trump administration, and in my view, is dishonest. It's dishonest. They should have talked to people who were on both sides of the fence about this issue, but they didn't. And also, they were not honest through acts of omission, not telling you about how the program has been paused. You decide for yourself, folks. Well, there's an update. April, for all those people freaking out, get a grip. I told you it shouldn't take that long, but I can't project. Now, maybe we have projection. Maybe by April, it'll be proposed to the president, which is what they're supposed to do. And then he'll approve it, and we'll move out from there. What say you, South Africa? Interesting, no?